Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Calista Thorne stood in the center of Ironveil Forest with blood dripping from her palms and her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The entire pack circled her like wolves around wounded prey, their eyes glowing amber in the twilight. She had broken the one rule no one ever broke. She had touched him. Vex Ashford stood 10 feet away, his massive frame trembling with barely controlled rage, his claws extended and his fangs bared. His eyes were black pits, no humanity left in them. The pack whispered that he was cursed, that he was more beast than man, that anyone who got too close would be torn apart. And Calista had just stepped between him and a child. The child, a small girl named Briar, sobbed behind Callista's legs, clutching the fabric of her torn dress. Vex had been in one of his rages, the kind that made grown men flee and mothers pull their children indoors. No one knew what triggered them. No one dared ask. But when Briar had wandered too close to his territory, when she had stumbled and cried out, Vex had snapped. He had lunged, and Calista, without thinking, without planning, had thrown herself between them. Now his black eyes were locked on her, his chest heaving, his entire body coiled like a spring about to explode. The pack leader, Dryston Cove, stood at the edge of the clearing with his arms crossed, watching, waiting. This was a test, Calista realized, a test she had no idea how to pass. Vex took a step forward, his claws scraping the dirt, and Callista's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the heat radiating off his body, could smell the wildness on him like smoke and iron. Everyone said he was a monster. Everyone said he had killed before. Everyone said the curse that lived inside him would one day consume him completely. But Calista had seen something else in that split second before she moved. She had seen his eyes flicker, just for a moment, when Briar screamed. She had seen hesitation, fear, and that was why she stood here now, her knees shaking but her feet planted, refusing to move. Because monsters don't hesitate. Monsters don't feel fear. And if Vex was truly lost, truly gone, then she was about to die. But if there was even a shred of him left, even the smallest piece of the man he used to be, then maybe, just maybe, she could reach it. She lifted her hand slowly, palm out, fingers trembling. The pack gasped. Someone shouted for her to stop. Dryston's eyes narrowed, but Calista kept her hand steady, kept her gaze locked on Vex's face, and she spoke. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "I see you," she said. "I see you, Vex. You're still in there." His body went rigid, his claws flexed. For a moment she thought he would lunge, thought she would feel those claws rip through her chest and end everything right here. But then something shifted. His breathing slowed. His eyes, those black, bottomless eyes, flickered. Just for a second. Just long enough for her to see a flash of amber, a flash of the man buried beneath the beast. And then he turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving Calista standing alone in the clearing, with her hands still outstretched and the entire pack staring at her like she had just performed a miracle. Dryston stepped forward, his expression unreadable, and when he spoke, his voice was cold and sharp. "You just signed your death warrant, girl," he said. "He won't stop coming for you now, and when he does, no one will be able to save you." Calista lowered her hand, her heart still racing, her mind spinning. She didn't know if Dryston was right. She didn't know if she had just made the worst mistake of her life. But as she looked into the dark trees where Vex had vanished, she felt something stir deep in her chest. Something reckless. Something terrifying. Because she didn't want to be saved. She wanted to understand. 3 months earlier, Calista Thorne had arrived in Ironveil Forest with nothing but a backpack, a broken phone, and a letter from her brother Lennox that said he was sorry. Sorry for leaving her behind. Sorry for joining a pack she had never heard of. Sorry for not being there when their parents died. The letter had been brief, almost cold, and it had told her exactly where to find him. But when she arrived at the edge of the pack's territory, Lennox wasn't there to meet her. Instead, it was Marlo Reed, a sharp-eyed woman with scars on her arms and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Marlo had looked Calista up and down like she was inspecting livestock, and then said, "You're the sister. He didn't mention you were so small." Calista had spent her entire life being underestimated. She was 5'3", slim, with pale skin that burned in the sun and dark hair that never stayed in place. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a werewolf pack. She didn't look like someone who could survive in a place where strength was everything and weakness got you killed. But she had nowhere else to go. No home. No family except Lennox. And so she had followed Marlo through the trees, past the old cabins and the training grounds, past the pack members who stared at her with suspicion and disdain until they reached a small shack at the edge of the territory. "You'll stay here," Marlo had said. "Don't wander. Don't cause trouble. And whatever you do, stay away from Vex Ashford." Calista had asked who Vex was, and Marlo's expression had darkened. "He's the reason half the pack sleeps with one eye open," she said. "He's cursed. Lost control 5 years ago and killed 3 people. Drystein keeps him around because he's useful in a fight. But no one goes near him. No one talks to him. And if you're smart, you won't either." Calista had nodded, had promised to follow the rules, but even then she had felt a pull of curiosity. She had seen the fear in Marlo's eyes, the way her voice had dropped to a whisper when she said his name. And Calista had always been drawn to the things people feared. It was a flaw, she knew, a dangerous one. But she couldn't help it. The first time she saw Vex, it was by accident. She had been exploring the forest, trying to find a stream Marlo had mentioned, when she had stumbled into a clearing. And there he was, Vex Ashford. He was massive, easily 6'5", with broad shoulders and a body that looked like it had been carved from stone. His hair was dark and wild, falling past his shoulders, and his eyes were a strange, shifting amber that seemed to glow in the shadows. He was shirtless, covered in scars, and he was chopping wood with a violence that made Callista's stomach twist. Each swing of the axe was brutal, precise, and filled with a rage that radiated off him like heat. She had stood there, frozen, watching him, and then he had looked up. Their eyes had met, and for a moment the world had gone silent. He hadn't said anything, hadn't moved. He had just stared at her with those burning eyes, and Calista had felt something she couldn't name. Fear, yes, but also something else, something deeper. And then he had turned away, had gone back to his work, and she had run. She had run all the way back to her shack, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. Marlo had found her an hour later and had known immediately. "You saw him," she said. It wasn't a question. Calista had nodded, and Marlo had sighed. "Stay away from him, Calista. I mean it. He's not like the rest of us. He's not safe." But Calista had never been good at staying away from danger. And over the next 3 months, she had seen Vex again and again, always from a distance, always watching. She had seen him train alone in the early mornings, his movements almost beautiful in their brutality. She had seen him sit by the fire at night, isolated from the rest of the pack, his face hard and empty. She had seen the way people avoided him, the way they whispered and pointed and treated him like a ticking bomb. And she had started to wonder, what had happened to him? What had turned him into this? And why, when everyone else looked at him with fear and disgust, did she feel something that looked dangerously close to compassion? Calista learned about Vex's curse from Oren Grey, the pack's eldest wolf, and the only one who seemed willing to talk about the past without flinching. Oren was ancient, his face lined with scars, and his eyes clouded with age, but his mind was sharp. He sat in a rocking chair outside his cabin every evening, watching the sun set over Ironveil Forest, and one night Calista gathered the courage to approach him. She asked about Vex. Oren had gone quiet for a long time, so long that Calista thought he wouldn't answer. But then he spoke, his voice low and heavy. "Vex wasn't always like this," he said. 5 years ago, he was one of the best of us. Strong, loyal, kind even. He had a mate. Her name was Alara. Oren told her the story slowly, carefully, like he was handling glass. Vex and Alara had been inseparable, bound by the mate bond that was supposed to be unbreakable. They had planned to leave the pack, to start their own life somewhere far from Ironveil. But Drystan had other plans. Drystan wanted Vex's strength, his skill in battle, and he couldn't afford to lose him. So Drystan had done something unforgivable. He had sent Alara on a mission, a dangerous one, knowing she wouldn't survive. And when Vex found out, when he learned that Drystan had knowingly sent his mate to her death, something inside him had shattered. The mate bond breaking had triggered the curse, Oren explained. A rare, ancient curse that turned grief into rage, that twisted a wolf's humanity into something monstrous. Vex had lost control completely. He had shifted into his wolf form and gone on a rampage, killing 3 pack members before Drystan and a group of fighters had managed to subdue him. They had chained him, locked him away, and when he finally came back to himself, the damage was done. The curse had taken root. Now, whenever Vex felt strong emotion, anger, fear, grief, the beast inside him surged to the surface. He couldn't control it, couldn't stop it, and so he had isolated himself, had cut himself off from everyone, because he knew that if he let anyone close, if he let himself feel anything, he would lose control again, and next time, he might not come back. Calista had sat there in the fading light, her heart aching, as Oren finished the story. "Drystan keeps him around because Vex is still useful," Oren said bitterly. "He's a weapon, a tool, but he's not a man anymore. Not really. And there's no cure for what he has. No way to break the curse. The only thing that could have saved him was his mate, and she's gone." Calista had thanked Oren and walked back to her shack in silence, her mind spinning. She thought about the way Vex looked when he sat alone by the fire, the way his hands shook sometimes, like he was fighting something inside himself, the way his eyes had flickered when she had stepped between him and Briar. That night, Calista made a decision. She didn't know if it was reckless, or brave, or just plain stupid. But she decided that she wasn't going to let Vex be alone anymore. She didn't know how to break a curse. She didn't know if she could even help him. But she knew what it felt like to be abandoned, to be left behind, to feel like no one cared if you lived or died. And she wasn't going to let him feel that way anymore. Even if it killed her. Even if everyone thought she was insane, she was going to try. The next morning, Calista walked to Vex's cabin. It was far from the main camp, hidden deep in the trees, and the path was overgrown and dark. Her heart pounded with every step, but she didn't turn back. When she reached the door, she knocked. Once. Twice. The door flew open, and Vex stood there, his eyes blazing with fury, his voice a growl. "What do you want?" Calista lifted her chin, forced herself to meet his gaze, and said the words that would change everything. "I want to help you." He stared at her like she had just spoken a foreign language, and then he laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound, devoid of any warmth. "Help me?" he said. "You can't even help yourself, girl. Get out of here before I do something we'll both regret." But Calista didn't move. She stood there, her hands clenched into fists, her voice steady. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. And it was a lie. She was terrified, but she said it anyway, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pretend you're not scared. Vex's expression shifted. The anger faded, replaced by something darker, something almost like pain. "You should be," he said quietly, and then he slammed the door in her face. Calista stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door, and then she turned and walked away. But she didn't give up. because she had seen it again, just for a second. That flicker in his eyes, that tiny shred of humanity, and she knew, deep in her bones, that Vex Ashford wasn't beyond saving. Not yet. Calista returned to Vex's cabin every morning for a week. She didn't knock. She didn't try to force her way in. She just sat on the ground outside his door, her back against the wall, and she talked. She told him about her life before Ironveil, about her parents who had died in a car accident when she was 16, about Lennox who had left her alone in a crumbling apartment with nothing but a promise to come back, about the years she had spent working dead-end jobs, trying to survive, trying to find some kind of purpose. She told him about the loneliness, the way it felt like the world had forgotten she existed, and she told him that she understood what it was like to feel like a monster. Vex never opened the door, never acknowledged her, but Calista knew he was listening. She could feel it. On the 4th day, she brought him food, a plate of bread and stew she had made herself. She left it by the door and walked away. The next morning, the plate was empty. On the 5th day, she brought him a blanket. It was old and threadbare, but it was clean, and she left it folded neatly on his doorstep. The next morning, it was gone. On the 6th day, she didn't bring anything. She just sat there, her knees pulled to her chest, and she said, "I know you think you're broken. I know you think there's nothing left of you worth saving. But I don't believe that. I think you're still in there, Vex. And I'm not giving up on you." The door opened. Callista's breath caught. Vex stood there, his face hard and unreadable, his eyes burning with something she couldn't name. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his hair wild, his jaw clenched. "Why?" he said, his voice rough. "Why do you keep coming here? What do you want from me?" Calista stood slowly, her heart racing. "I don't want anything," she said. I don't think you should be alone." Vex's jaw tightened. He looked away, his hands curling into fists. "I'm alone because I have to be," he said. "Because if I'm not, people get hurt. People die. You don't understand what I am, what I've done." Calista took a step closer, her voice soft. "Then tell me," she said. "Tell me what happened. Tell me what you're so afraid of." Vex's eyes snapped back to hers, and for a moment she saw the full weight of his pain. It was like staring into an abyss. "I killed them," he said, his voice breaking. 3 people. Good people. I tore them apart with my bare hands, and I didn't even know I was doing it. The curse, it takes over. It turns me into something I can't control, and one day it's going to take over completely, and I won't come back. So don't stand there and tell me I'm worth saving, because I'm not. I'm a monster, and the sooner you realize that, the safer you'll be. Callista's throat tightened. She could see the shame in his eyes, the guilt that was eating him alive, and she realized in that moment that Vex wasn't angry at the world. He was angry at himself. He hated what he had become, and he believed with every fiber of his being that he deserved to be alone. "You're not a monster," Calista said, her voice firm. "You're a man who's been through hell, and yes, you did something terrible, but you didn't choose it. The curse chose it for you, and that doesn't mean you're beyond redemption." Vex stared at her, his chest heaving, his eyes glistening. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. But his voice had lost its edge. It sounded almost desperate. Calista took another step closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. "Maybe I don't," she said, "but I know what it's like to hate yourself. I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough, like you'll never be enough, and I know that the only way to survive that is to let someone in, to let someone see you, all of you, and choose to stay anyway." Vex's hands trembled. He looked at her like she was something fragile, something precious, something he was terrified to touch. "If I let you in," he said quietly, "I'll destroy you." Calista smiled, a sad, broken smile. "Then I guess we'll just have to make sure that doesn't happen." and for the first time in 5 years, Vex Ashford let someone inside his cabin. He stepped aside, and Calista walked past him, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. The cabin was small and dark, with almost no furniture and a cold fireplace. It smelled like smoke and earth and loneliness. Vex closed the door behind them, and they stood there in the dim light, two broken people trying to figure out how to save each other. "I don't know how to do this," Vex said, his voice barely above a whisper. Calista turned to face him, her eyes steady. "Neither do I," she said, "but we'll figure it out, together." News of Callista's visits to Vex spread through the pack like wildfire. Within days, everyone knew, and everyone had an opinion. Some thought she was brave. Most thought she was stupid, and a few thought she was dangerous. Senna Blackwell was one of the latter. Senna was tall, beautiful, and vicious, with sleek black hair and eyes like ice. She had been trying to climb the pack hierarchy for years, and she saw Calista as a threat. Not because Calista was strong or skilled, but because she had done something no one else had dared to do. She had gotten close to Vex, and in a pack where power was everything, that made her a wild card. Senna confronted Calista one afternoon near the training grounds. She had 2 other women with her, both loyal followers, and they cornered Calista against a tree. "You think you're special, don't you?" Senna said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You think because Vex lets you sit outside his door like a stray dog, that means you matter, but you don't. You're nothing. A weak little human girl who doesn't belong here. And when Vex finally snaps and rips you apart, no one's going to mourn you. They're going to say you deserved it." Callista's heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'm not trying to be special," she said. "I'm just trying to help him." Senna laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "Help him? You can't even shift. You can't fight. You can't do anything. You're dead weight, and the only reason Dryston hasn't kicked you out is because of your brother. But Lennox isn't here to protect you anymore. He left on patrol 2 weeks ago and hasn't come back. For all you know, he's dead. So what are you going to do when you're all alone, Calista? When there's no one left to care if you live or die?" The words hit Calista like a punch to the gut. Lennox had been gone for 2 weeks, and no one had told her. She had assumed he was busy, that he was avoiding her. But now doubt crept in. What if Senna was right? What if something had happened to him? Calista swallowed hard, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Even if Lennox is gone," she said, "that doesn't change anything. I'm not leaving, and I'm not going to stop trying to help Vex, no matter what you think of me." Senna's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You're going to get yourself killed," she said. "And when you do, I'll be the first one to say I told you so." She turned and walked away, her followers trailing behind her, and Calista stood there, her hands shaking, her mind racing. She needed to find out what had happened to Lennox, but more than that, she needed to stay focused. Because Senna was right about one thing. Calista was vulnerable, and if she wasn't careful, the pack would eat her alive. That night, Calista went to Vex's cabin again. She told him about Senna, about the threats, about Lennox. Vex listened in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes dark. When she finished, he stood and walked to the window, staring out into the forest. "Your brother is fine," he said finally. "I saw him yesterday. He's on patrol near the northern border. Dryston extended his route because there's been trouble with rogues." Callista's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," she said quietly. Vex turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Senna's right about one thing," he said. "You're in danger here. Not just from me, from the pack. They see you as weak, and in a place like this, weakness gets you killed." Calista stood, her chin lifting. "Then I'll get stronger," she said. Vex's eyes flickered with something that might have been respect. "You can't shift," he said. "You're human. You'll never be strong enough to survive here on your own." Calista stepped closer, her voice firm. "Then teach me," she said. "Teach me how to fight. Teach me how to defend myself. I'm not going to run, Vex. This is my home now, whether the pack likes it or not, and I'm not going to let them break me." Vex stared at her for a long moment, and then, slowly, he nodded. "Fine," he said. "But if I'm going to train you, you do exactly what I say. No questions, no hesitation. Understood?" Calista nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "Understood," she said, and for the first time since she had arrived in Ironveil Forest, she felt like she had a purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting back, and with Vex by her side, she might just have a chance. Training with Vex was brutal. He didn't go easy on her, didn't coddle her. Every morning before dawn, Calista met him in a clearing deep in the forest, and he pushed her to her limits. He taught her how to block, how to strike, how to read an opponent's movements. He taught her how to use her size to her advantage, how to be quick and unpredictable, and he taught her how to fall without breaking. "Pain is a teacher," he said one morning after she had hit the ground for the 10th time. "The more you feel it, the less you fear it, and when you stop fearing it, you become dangerous." Callista's body ached constantly. Her muscles screamed. Her knuckles bled, but she didn't quit. She got up every time she fell. She threw every punch he asked her to throw. And slowly, over the weeks, she started to see results. She was faster, stronger, more confident. But more than that, she was learning to trust Vex. He was patient with her in a way she hadn't expected. He corrected her form without cruelty. He pushed her without breaking her. And sometimes, when she landed a good hit, or executed a move perfectly, she saw something in his eyes that looked almost like pride. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session, they sat by the stream that ran through the forest. Calista splashed cold water on her face, trying to cool down, and Vex sat a few feet away, his eyes distant. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why are you helping me?" Vex was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because you're the first person in 5 years who hasn't looked at me like I'm a monster." Callista's chest tightened. "You're not a monster, Vex," she said softly. He turned to look at her, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it took her breath away. "You don't know that," he said. "You don't know what I'm capable of." Calista moved closer, her voice gentle. "I know that you've been fighting this curse every day for 5 years. I know that you've isolated yourself, that you've suffered, because you don't want to hurt anyone. That's not what a monster does, Vex. That's what a good man does." Vex's jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. "I killed 3 people, Calista," he said, his voice breaking. "I tore them apart. I can still hear their screams. I can still see their faces, and every day I wake up knowing that it could happen again, that I could lose control and hurt someone else. Hurt you." Calista reached out and placed her hand over his. His skin was warm, rough, and she felt him tense at the contact. "Then we'll make sure it doesn't," she said. "We'll figure this out together." Vex stared down at her hand on his, and for a moment he didn't move. Then, slowly he turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. "I don't deserve this," he said quietly. "I don't deserve you." Calista squeezed his hand, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. "Maybe not," she said. "But you have me anyway." They sat there in silence, their hands intertwined, and for the first time in a long time, Vex felt something other than rage and guilt. He felt hope, and it terrified him. Because hope was dangerous. Hope made you believe that things could get better. And every time Vex had let himself hope, the world had ripped it away. But as he looked at Calista, at the determination in her eyes and the strength in her small frame, he realized that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe this time he wouldn't lose everything. Maybe this time he could save something. Someone. And maybe if he was very lucky, she could save him too. The rogues attacked on a moonless night when the forest was dark and silent. Calista was asleep in her shack when she heard the first scream, She bolted upright, her heart racing, and grabbed the knife Vex had given her for protection. Outside, chaos erupted. Wolves howled, people shouted, the smell of blood filled the air. Calista ran outside and saw pack members shifting, their bodies twisting and contorting as they transformed into their wolf forms. Drystan was barking orders, his voice cutting through the noise. Protect the perimeter. Don't let them breach the center. Callista's mind raced. She wasn't a fighter, not really, but she had trained for this. Vex had prepared her for this. She scanned the clearing and saw Marlowe, fighting off 2 rogues, her claws slashing through the air. Briar, the little girl Calista had protected, was huddled with other children near the main cabin, crying. And then Calista saw him. Vex. He was in the thick of the battle, his wolf form massive and terrifying, his jaws clamped around a rogue's throat. He moved with a savage grace, every strike lethal, every movement calculated. But Calista could see the wildness in his eyes. The curse was rising. He was losing control. A rogue broke through the line and charged toward the children. Calista didn't think. She ran. She threw herself between the rogue and Briar, her knife raised, and she slashed at the creature's face. The rogue snarled and backhanded her, sending her sprawling to the ground. Pain exploded in her ribs, her vision blurred, but she forced herself to her feet, her knife still clutched in her hand. The rogue advanced, its eyes glowing red, its fangs bared. Calista braced herself, and then Vex was there. He slammed into the rogue with the force of a freight train, his claws ripping through flesh and bone. The rogue didn't stand a chance. Vex tore it apart in seconds, his movements brutal and efficient. But when he turned to face Calista, his eyes were black, empty. The curse had taken over. Callista's breath caught. She had seen this before in the clearing 3 months ago, but this time was different. This time there was no hesitation, no flicker of recognition. Vex stalked toward her, his body tense, his claws extended. The pack members who were still conscious backed away, their faces filled with fear. Drystan shouted for someone to restrain him, but no one moved. No one was brave enough, or stupid enough, to get close. Calista stood her ground. Her body screamed at her to run, to get as far away as possible. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because if she ran, Vex would lose himself completely, and she wasn't going to let that happen. She dropped her knife. Slowly she raised her hands, palms out, just like she had done before. Vex, she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. It's me. It's Calista. I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. Vex growled, a deep, guttural sound that made her bones rattle. He took another step closer. I'm not afraid of you, Calista said, and this time it wasn't a lie. She wasn't afraid. Not of him, not of the beast, because she knew, deep in her soul, that Vex would never hurt her. Not truly. Not if he could help it. I see you, Vex, she said softly. I see you, and I'm not going anywhere. Vex stopped. His body trembled, his claws flexed, and then, slowly, the blackness in his eyes began to fade. Amber broke through, just a flicker at first and then more. His breathing slowed, his body relaxed. And when he looked at her, really looked at her, Calista saw the man she had come to care for, the man she had come to love. Vex shifted back into his human form, collapsing to his knees, his chest heaving. Blood covered his body, some his, most not. He looked up at Calista, his eyes filled with horror and shame. I almost killed you, he said, his voice raw. Calista knelt in front of him, her hands cupping his face. But you didn't, she said. You came back. You always come back. And then she kissed him. It was soft, tentative, filled with all the emotions she couldn't put into words. And when Vex kissed her back, his hands trembling as they held her, Calista knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the rogue attack left the pack shaken. 5 rogues had been killed, but 2 pack members had died in the fighting. Drystan called a meeting the next morning, his face grim. He stood before the gathered pack, his eyes hard, and he said, We were unprepared, vulnerable, and that ends now. We will increase patrols. We will strengthen our defenses, and we will not allow another attack like this to happen." His gaze shifted to Vex, who stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. "Vex fought well last night," Dryston said, "but he also lost control, again, and that is a risk we cannot afford." Murmurs rippled through the pack. Senna stepped forward, her voice sharp. "He's a liability," she said. "He's going to get us all killed. We should exile him. Send him away before he destroys us." Several pack members nodded in agreement. But before Dryston could respond, Calista stepped forward. Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady. "Vex saved lives last night," she said. "He killed more rogues than anyone else. And yes, he lost control, but he came back. He didn't hurt anyone, and if you exile him, you'll be losing your strongest fighter." Senna laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "And who are you to speak for him? You're not even part of this pack. You're a human. A weak, pathetic—" "Enough," Vex said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on Senna. "Calista is under my protection, and if you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me." Senna's eyes widened. For a moment she looked like she might argue, but then she saw the look in Vex's eyes, the promise of violence, and she stepped back. Dryston watched the exchange with a calculating gaze. Then he said, "Vex will stay, for now. But this is his last chance. If he loses control again, if he puts this pack in danger, I will exile him myself. Is that understood?" Vex nodded, his jaw tight. "Understood." The meeting ended, and the pack dispersed. Calista followed Vex back to his cabin, her mind spinning. When they were alone, Vex turned to her, his expression pained. "You shouldn't have spoken up for me," he said. "You just made yourself a target." Calista crossed her arms, her eyes fierce. "I don't care," she said. "They were wrong. You're not a liability, Vex. You're the strongest person I know, and I'm not going to stand by and let them tear you down." Vex stared at her, his chest tight. "Why do you care so much?" he asked. "Why do you keep fighting for me when everyone else has given up?" Calista stepped closer, her voice soft. "Because I love you," she said. The words hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Vex's eyes widened, his breath hitched. "You don't mean that," he said. "You can't." Calista reached up and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. "I do," she said. "I love you, Vex. I love your strength. I love your pain. I love the way you fight every day to be better. And I love the way you look at me, like I'm the only person in the world who matters. So yes, I mean it, and I'm not taking it back." Vex's hands came up to cup her face, his touch gentle despite the strength in his body. "I don't deserve you," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't deserve any of this." Calista smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Maybe not," she said. "But you have me anyway, and I'm not going anywhere." Vex pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. And for the first time in 5 years, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have something good. Something worth fighting for. Something worth living for. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. Lennox returned from patrol, and with him came news that sent shockwaves through the pack. A group of rogues, larger and more organized than any they had faced before, was heading toward Ironveil. They were led by Cale Winters, a rogue alpha with a reputation for brutality, and according to Lennox, they were coming for Vex. "They know about the curse," Lennox said, his face pale. "They know that if they can trigger it, if they can make Vex lose control, the pack will tear itself apart. Dryston won't have a choice but to exile him, and once he's gone, we'll be vulnerable." Dryston's expression was grim. "Then we prepare," he said. "We fortify our defenses, we set traps, and we make sure that when they come, we're ready." But Calista could see the doubt in his eyes. He didn't believe they could win. Not against an organized force. Not with Vex as a wild card. That night, Calista found Vex sitting by the fire outside his cabin, his eyes distant. She sat beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "We'll get through this," she said. Vex shook his head. "They're coming for me, Calista," he said, "and they're going to use me to destroy this pack. I won't let that happen." Callista's stomach twisted. "What are you saying?" Vex turned to look at her, his eyes filled with a terrible resolve. "I'm saying that I'm going to leave," he said, "before they get here, before I become the weapon they want me to be." Callista's heart stopped. "No," she said, her voice fierce. "You're not leaving. We'll figure this out. We'll find a way to—" "There is no other way," Vex shouted, his voice breaking. "Don't you see? As long as I'm here, everyone I care about is in danger. You're in danger, and I won't let that happen." Calista grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "You're not doing this alone," she said. "You're not running. You're not giving up. We're going to fight Vex, together, and we're going to win." Vex's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I can't protect you," he said. "I can't even protect myself." Callista's voice was steady, unwavering. "Then let me protect you," she said. "Let me stand by your side. Let me fight for you the way you fought for me. Because I'm not losing you, Vex. Not to the rogues, not to the curse, not to anything." Vex pulled her into his arms, his body shaking, and for the first time in 5 years, he let himself cry. He cried for Alara, for the life he had lost, for the man he used to be, and he cried for Calista, for the future they might never have. But even as he wept, he felt something shift inside him. The curse was still there, still simmering beneath the surface, but so was something else, something stronger. Love, hope, and the fierce, unbreakable bond between two people who refused to give up on each other. When the rogues came 3 days later, Vex and Calista were ready. They stood side by side, their hands clasped, their eyes locked on the forest. And as the first howls echoed through the trees, Calista whispered, "Together." Vex squeezed her hand. "Together," he said. And they charged into battle, not as a monster and a girl, but as two souls fighting for the same thing, a future, a home, and each other. The battle was chaos. Rogues poured into the clearing, their eyes wild, their movements coordinated. Cale Winters led the charge, his wolf form massive and scarred, his presence radiating dominance. He locked eyes with Vex from across the battlefield, and Calista saw the cold calculation in his gaze. He wasn't here to win a fight. He was here to break Vex, to trigger the curse, to turn him into the monster everyone feared. And Calista knew, with a sinking certainty, that if Cale succeeded, Vex would never forgive himself. He would be lost forever. Vex shifted into his wolf form, his body massive and powerful, and he launched himself at Cale. The two alphas collided with a force that shook the ground. Claws slashed, fangs snapped, blood sprayed. Calista fought beside Marlowe, her knife flashing as she took down a smaller rogue. But her eyes kept darting back to Vex. She could see the wildness creeping into his movements. The curse was rising. Cale was goading him, taunting him, pushing him closer and closer to the edge. "Is this all you've got?" Cale snarled, his voice echoing across the clearing. "I heard you were a killer, a beast, but all I see is a broken dog." Vex roared, his eyes flashing black, and he lunged, but Cale was ready. He sidestepped, his claws raking across Vex's side, and Vex stumbled. Callista's heart stopped. She saw the moment it happened, saw the blackness flood Vex's eyes completely, saw his body tense, his movements becoming erratic, uncontrolled. The curse had taken over. Vex turned, his gaze sweeping across the battlefield, and Calista realized with horror that he couldn't tell friend from foe. He was lost, and if she didn't do something, he would tear through the pack. She ran, not away from him, but toward him. "Calista, no!" Marlowe screamed, but Calista didn't stop. She dropped her knife and threw herself in front of Vex, her arms outstretched. Vex lunged, his claws raised, his fangs bared, but Calista didn't flinch. She stood her ground, her eyes locked on his. "Vex," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "It's me. It's Calista. I know you're in there. I know you can hear me." Vex's claws stopped inches from her chest. His body trembled. His breathing was ragged. "I love you," Calista said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Vex, and I'm not giving up on you. Not now. Not ever. So come back to me. Please, come back." For a moment, nothing happened. And then, slowly, the blackness in Vex's eyes began to fade. Amber broke through, warm and familiar. His claws retracted, his body relaxed. And when he looked at her, really looked at her, Calista saw the man she loved. Vex shifted back into his human form, collapsing to his knees. Calista dropped beside him, her hands cupping his face. "You came back," she whispered. Vex's hands came up to cover hers, his eyes filled with wonder. "You brought me back," he said. Behind them, the battle raged on, but Kale, seeing that his plan had failed, called a retreat. The rogues scattered into the forest, and the pack gave chase. Dristan approached Vex and Calista, his expression unreadable. "You did well," he said to Vex. "Both of you." Vex stood, pulling Calista to her feet. "I'm not leaving," he said. "This is my pack, my home, and I'm done running." Dristan studied him for a long moment, then he nodded. "Good," he said, "because we need you." In the days that followed, the pack began to change. Vex was no longer treated as an outcast. People still kept their distance, still whispered, but there was a new respect in their eyes. And Calista, the small human girl who had tamed a monster, became a symbol of something they hadn't believed in for a long time. Hope. Vex and Calista built a life together. Not a perfect life. Not an easy one, but a real one. The curse was still there, still lurking beneath the surface. But Calista had learned how to bring him back, and Vex had learned that he wasn't alone, that he didn't have to carry the weight of his past by himself, that love, real love, was stronger than any curse. One evening, as they sat by the fire outside their cabin, Vex turned to Calista and said, "I never thought I'd have this, a future, someone to share it with." Calista leaned her head against his shoulder, her hand intertwined with his. "You deserve it," she said. "You deserve all of it." Vex kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "I don't know if I deserve it," he said, "but I'm grateful for it. For you." Calista smiled, her eyes shining. "Then let's make the most of it," she said. "Every day, every moment." And they did. They built a life filled with love, with laughter, with struggle and triumph. And through it all they stood together, a monster and the girl who tamed him, a beast and the woman who saw the man inside. And in the end, that was all that mattered. If you made it this far, you just experienced something powerful. Drop a comment and tell me, what moment hit you the hardest? Was it when Calista first stood between Vex and the child? When she told him she loved him? Or when she brought him back from the curse in the final battle? I want to hear your thoughts. And if this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to believe in love, redemption, and second chances. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know what story you want to hear next. Until then, remember, everyone has a beast inside them. The question is, who will help you tame it?